Hello, I'm Josh Baer, and welcome to the Baer Faxt Podcast. In this episode, we talk with Rirkrit Tiravanija. Not only can I say it correctly, I can spell it, an artist who you should know. Rirkrit is often categorized with a bunch of other very interesting artists under the rubric of relational aesthetics. I have a harder time saying that than Rirkrit Tiravanija, but he may not agree with the aesthetics part of this description, but we discuss that, so keep listening to find out why. So, welcome to the Baer Faxt Podcast. We're trying something which is a little bit new. We're taping a podcast on the go, in another continent, in a moving vehicle, and on the golf course. So, hopefully this all works out and we can start doing podcasts for the Live Tour when we're next in the Gulf. I'm sitting in the car in Doha, Qatar, with my friend, the great artist Rirkrit Tiravanija, on the way to play golf in Doha. What brings you to Doha?
Well, I have a public project which is in the Baer Park here, and yeah, we're activating it. It's just finished like a day ago.
We went there and it's like, with some of your artworks, it's like, is that the Rirkrit? Didn't see you standing in front of it. So it's like, okay, we're moving around, trying all these different breads. It's like, there's bread and there's bread. And it's like, that's sort of a classic artwork of yours in that way, isn't it?
Yeah, when I first met the Sheikha actually in Hong Kong, the one thing she said is like, I want you to go to Doha right away. And the other was like, she would like for me to think about doing kind of public work which would involve the communities that are working and living in Doha.
And how does this work with all these communities? And did you interact with them? And is there a lot of research involved, or?
Yeah, I mean, the interaction was a lot done already locally by people in the team. I mean, I came to Doha once before, basically, just to look at the location and plan things out. And partly, I guess, also because Doha is not like on my route. So they did a lot of research, and then my assistant came and went and did a lot of research with Tom Eccles, who basically curated the project. They have a lot of record. They know how many people are here and where and what. So in a sense, they already know. And I guess for me, it was more like the idea that we do a project that could be utilized by communities from like here all the way to like, say, East Asia, you know.
Well, it's an interesting place because only 10% of the population are Emirati, and then 2.5 million or something come from, I think, of the diaspora mostly of Asia. Do you feel sort of a natural affinity to that, to be Thai, to having been born in Argentina, going to school in Africa, living in Thailand, working as an artist in America and Europe? I mean, you're sort of, there's something to that combination, isn't that?
No, definitely. I did a project a long time ago at the National Gallery in Ottawa in Canada. And it was about my first experience landing in Canada.
How old were you?
I was like 19 when I arrived in Canada. And Ottawa being like the capital is somehow where a lot of migrants, immigrants land, you know. And so I did a project with the local immigrants where they all came to basically make the food that makes them remember home, right? You know, like when you travel, there's always something you eat to remind yourself.
Or if you're living in Sweden, you want Heinz ketchup to be there.
Or like your favorite food in your new place. So it was kind of both, you know. And we made a recipe book. And in a way, like this approach here is similar to that. And so we research, and of course a lot of communities here in the Middle East and South Asia the cuisine is based on bread. And so we researched like the ideas of the bakeries, and then we researched the ovens that would be used by these different kinds of cuisine to make their local bread.
Now, as somebody whose Thai is Asian, do you think of the Middle East as Asia? I mean, we tend not to discuss it that way, or as West Asia, or, I mean, do you feel like that there's something,
Affinity?
an affinity, or?
Not that way, because in Thailand we have a very mixed culture. So our southern part of Thailand is Muslim. So we have specific food from that community that we enjoy, like as Thais. And then, or we have a very large Indian community, as we do a large Chinese community. So there are like all these influences in our culture, in Thai culture. But I wouldn't say that I think of the Middle East as Asia. I mean, I don't even think about Asia in that way, right?
I guess it's a time of nationalism in political things that is really dividing, particularly the immigrants, and particularly in America, and that we're forced into that thinking at the same time of globalism going on.
Globalism was really meant for the West to basically recolonize the rest of the world, So I was always skeptical about any kind of openness, really. But I think at the moment, it's just about like an excuse or a kind of way to create division, right? And fear. Fortunately, I have to say that Thai culture is very open and receptive in a way to others. And so our perspective has always been kind of rather respectful of other people.
Well, I want to get back to politics in a few ways as it relates to some of your work, but sort of start in a bit of a historical sense. Do you remember when and where and how we first met? It's like about 35 years ago.
I remember, of course, meeting you because I think maybe the first project was like a Nancy Dwyer.
Could be. Do you remember when I hired you?
And then, of course, we did the...
So tell us about the Chris Burden project from your side, see if I have the same memory.
I remember we had a discussion, and my father had been stationed in Vietnam,
So Chris Burden came up with this proposal for a show in MoMA in 1990, which he called the Other Vietnam Memorial. Right. And it was taking the American one had opened, designed by Mile Inn in Washington. And it's quite powerful, as the names of all the dead Americans in the war. And Chris wanted to build the version with all the Vietnamese names into a sculpture. Yeah. And so he didn't even know if it existed, a record.
No, I mean, there is no record in that sense, right? Because they don't keep that.
Well, he didn't know that for sure then.
Yeah.
And we hired you to research that, not so much because you were Asian, it's because you also had access to the world of diplomats in the UN.
Yeah, and actually that research wasn't so easy because, of course, even the Vietnamese then weren't that open to it, and there are some records, but it's actually was collected by the Americans in a way.
You assembled 2,000 Vietnamese names, roughly.
Yeah.
And we created a sort of computer program to scramble them into 96 different plates. I think it's one of Chris's great sculptures. And involves politics, certainly, and otherness in a very strong way. By the way, works at the MCA in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And to what extent do politics overtly and not so overtly have entered into your work in the last, I'd say, 15 years, quite a bit?
I think it was always there from the beginning, maybe overtly more in the last 10, maybe 20 years even. And it's just kind of about the form maybe, because I started to use words. I use words because of the source in a way. When I layered these things and with the idea of like, let's say, using the New York Times as a kind of ground for these texts, right? So there's always like the stories.
I've always wondered to what extent the work of Anquara related to that of A Place and Time with the newspapers.
Well, definitely that, and also Paul Tech.
Say a little bit more about that, because most of our audience doesn't really.
Well, you know, Paul Tech is a kind of an artist. You know, artist loves Paul Tech because he's kind of on his own, and I mean, his practice was actually difficult to place, but in a way, kind of highly personal.
We're going to take a little break while we go check in to the golf course. Rirkrit, most people don't know, played on the senior tour in the United States, and he has a separate career under the name of Patrick Reed.
Yeah,
and that's Rirkrit.
I thought I was more like Nick Faldo type.
Ricky Fowler, the way you dress.
Are we still recording?
Yeah, we're still recording. So back to
actually Paul Tech. Well, it's funny because as a young art worker, I had been to Paul Tech's house, you know, on Lafayette to move some things around for him and for I'm not sure where he was showing then, maybe Brooke Alexander.
I think they worked with Brooke Alexander, yeah.
So we went and moved a few things, and I saw his work, and then I started to look into his work, and there's something about it. One of the experience of going to the house was that there's piles and piles of newspaper, which of course then he used as a kind of ground for like his paintings. And I always was impressed with that, but also because it's kind of like that's what he had, so he uses it, you know. And I would go to Berlin to just watch the Tour de France.
You watched the Tour de France in Berlin?
Yeah, you know, from beginning of July till the end of July. Back then, they never broadcasted in the U.S. So I would go and spend like a whole month just watching Tour de France, but really not watching, but just kind of reading the newspaper, you know, half reading, half watching. And then at some point I started to catch some things. Are we going the right way? I don't think they want us to see this.
Multitasking is not my specialty. Okay, let's get back this way. Well, that's around 1990 when you did your show with Paul Allen. I don't think I saw that show. I more remember your show at 303.
Yeah.
As more of the sort of, to my mind, your famous coming out party.
Yeah.
But in fact, you'd done a project with this other gallery.
Paula Allen, and actually remember Randy Alexander, who took over your space on Lafayette Street.
Really?
You remember your space up on the 11th floor?
Yeah, I remember my space, yeah.
Right? So Randy Alexander took over that space.
Oh, because I left in 1990 to go to Broome Street.
Yeah, and I was like the first show at Randy's. We did the Paula Allen show, and then he left and made his own gallery. So he asked me to do the first show.
So when you were making this work and these installations, did it come to you like in a dream, or was it a real formal like idea? Was it like, WTF? How did it come about?
It's actually all a process, and it's actually a lot of just kind of having a bit of time to think and also knowing the context. The context is always super important to me, like understanding where the show is. And
here we're arriving at the driving range here that looks out to one of the World Cup stadiums.
Well, when I play with Tomas, we go out at 5, so we start playing before
5 p.m.?
5 a.m.
5 a.m. Thomas is one of your fellow professors at Columbia. Tell us a little bit. It seems like art school, and particularly grad school, is a pretty difficult situation now for students, what it costs and what they're learning.
Yeah.
Sort of an open-ended question.
Maybe this should be your separate podcasting where you only interview people who play golf, like in the art world.
I think this could be our version of car karaoke with
Exactly.
James Condon. We're going to have driving range with the Baer Faxt. Of course, Rirkrit starts with driver.
And I can't see. Did it go?
Not far.
Not far? Well, that's good.
Okay.
I'm not, how far? 170?
Feet. Now you're getting the cheese high.
Was it straight?
You're going right for that guy there next to the lights. He's waking up. The tee's pretty high.
I'm just
loosening up to try to get.
I'm just getting my body to just swing. So yes, Tomas and I, we work at Columbia together, and he's actually the master printmaker.
Well, he runs the Neiman Print Center too, right? But are students under pressure for how to be artists when it's so much money spent for their education?
Yeah. Well, yes, and I think that's really wrong. I mean, I think to educate artists, it should all be free. Because often art historians go to school for free.
Because they're teaching at the same time?
Well, because they're teaching at the same time, but I don't know, they seem to have more funding for that.
Well, we were talking about politics before. Certainly, Columbia has been in the center of it. Anything about that comes to mind as to, as a faculty member, how they've been doing things?
Well, because we are visual art, not even the art, because the main arts, the School of the Arts is in the campus. The artists are not in campus, we're off to the side, so we don't get affected by that. But of course we get affected by the facts that, some students would they do express themselves, and maybe a little bit they do kind of come around and tell you to take things down.
I read this morning, certainly, about something, the museum in Rome, I think, in a show that you're involved with, too. And I don't know if you saw, but there's a boycott by some of the artists in the show.
Oh, they are?
Because they're saying the museum is too close to companies doing business in Israel.
Really? I wouldn't have expected that from Italy.
Well, there are Italian arms dealers or manufacturers. Oh, that's so good. I bet that was on film. Friggin', you got the wrong thing. I smoked it. We're going to have to edit this thing to that 5-iron was like a tight little draw. Well, it made me think about something and that Stefania Borrolomi said about, she thinks all artists should be also teaching so that they're under less pressure to sell. But with 3 million artists in America, it doesn't seem practical that there can be 3 million teaching positions there at the same time. It's good in a sense to take off the pressure for a certain thing about sales and all that if you're also teaching?
Well,
or is it case by case?
I mean, I would say, of course, I never did teach for the money, which is also part of my problem.
Well, what do you think of the art market? You're obviously in it. You're obviously able to support yourself.
I'm in it, but I'm not in it in a big way. I'm not anywhere near what people think. I have a recognition, but market-wise, I'm terrible. Josh, let me say this as an idea that I've never sold a show while it's open.
The entire show?
Entire show, any part of the show, or any number of, and of course, partly it's because of the nature of the work, but yeah, I don't have that kind of, there's no market for it.
Well, it's as on the other side, as an advisor trying to get people to buy your work, I'm thinking about the newspaper things, and then they're like, well, what about the secondary market? What is it going to be worth? Is there anything at auction? You have to only be buying your objects, and they're not, in the scheme of the art market, that expensive, but in the scheme of the real world, they're real money.
Yeah.
To get across that. Do you see these objects somewhat as a way, the mirrored objects, the sort of almost painting objects, as a way to help finance your broader practice?
Yes, for sure.
that's the challenge of like, and I think back to Matthew Barney having done that, the worst case, it's like the gift shop on the way out.
Yeah.
I think Matthew's great work for a while turned into that for what he was doing, and he needed millions to do his films.
Yeah. Well, I do kind of make it with the consciousness of that, but at the same time, I also hope that the work itself is doing something.
I love them, and it's like, and I'm sorry I missed the show in Paris where you had these weird sculptures on the floor.
Yes.
That you and another Thai artist.
Myself and Udom Sak.
Is he a good golfer, by the way?
Yeah. Well, he was the better. I mean, he's the one who would, take me around.
And so, what are these things made of? These sculptures.
Wax. Yeah, wax and hair.
Are they going to melt?
No, like they're, like Madame Tussauds.
I want to give a shout out to an old mutual friend of ours, Carter Costera, who made this great wax sculpture of himself melting. And way before an artist whose work I also love became famous for them, Urs Fischer, but Carter was doing it. Do you remember those sculptures of his?
Yes, yeah.
They were pretty great.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's going about 270, right to left. Oh, that's just so money. That must be almost 200 yards. Last sort of question that I was thinking about, and I'm going to come at it in two ways, or three. It's like most artists generally don't embrace whatever sort of ism they're used to describe their work. So my mother, being an abstract artist, was called a minimalist. She would not, and most of the artists at the time have agreed with that term, even though it's that way. And the notion that relationship art or relationship aesthetics being a bit of an ism, how do you react to that terminology? Certainly the artists you're grouped with are a bunch of very interesting artists in that way. So it's sort of an open-ended question.
You mean the relational idea?
Relational idea.
Yeah. No, I mean, I always say I love the relational part. I don't like the aesthetics. Because for me, it is about relational and not so much about, in a way, looking.
But can you ever completely get away from aesthetics when you're making art?
I think I've done a pretty good job. Like yesterday, people were standing there. They had no idea that was like some artwork, right? They just thought, oh, this is a part of the situation they're in, So that's totally fine by me, because of course it's not about the thing that's there. That's just the platform for all those people coming and being there.
It's so different. I was talking to a client of mine who bought a major David Hammond's tarp painting, and he put it in his house, and he calls me up and he says, I know it's powerful, I know it's historic, I know all those things, but it's beautiful. And I said, you jerk, you won. I mean, if you can get that too, is it not something that, like how you created that environment, you care a little bit about how it looks, right? Not just how it functions.
It's down to the centimeter, to the millimeter, what I'm interested in or what I'm looking at or what is part of the layers of which becomes that platform. So there are informations that could be, peeled back when you really have time and spend time with it, right? There are different levels.
I think that's a really important point where it's looking at any art. We tend to look at it for 2 seconds or 5 seconds, but sort of the best art rewards you the more you go, but does it create an entry point too? My friend Philippe Verno I saw on this trip, I don't know if he invented the term, he's saying elitism for all. But I embrace elitism as a good thing, that there are some things that are highly complex, that take time, that you don't get in 2 seconds, but we don't want to say, well, you're the public, you don't know anything, you're out.
Well, on the one hand, I was saying to you, it's important for me to understand the context of which the work appears, And in that relationship, there's a layer.
So you start with the context and then get to the object rather than starting with the objectness or the performance, and get to the context. So you flipped it.
Context, I start with the idea and all the situation around it, people, air, heat, everything. So really, in a way, the more I understand the place, the better for me in terms of the work. So, for example, like this exhibition now at Chantal, I had to make some walkthrough with some people to explain it. I said, it's a thought process. I didn't sit in studio for days and make each work and then decide what's going to go into the show. It was a thought process where generally I would be like, okay, this is going to be the title of the show. And this title of the show could be this and this and that. And then I just pulled things together. Literally that show, in a way, came together in a month, right? I mean, I knew about it maybe a year and a half ago, but, it's understanding the space, understanding that I'm showing
art in a gallery, which is a different thing by itself, right?
In a gallery, but it's also the space itself. It's like this apartment, this bourgeois, highly decorative room with like really white walls. So it's all like a bunch of problems I have to deal with, right? I think in a way the thought process is like slowly dealing how to use that problem.
Well, you were probably thinking about that problem for a year without sitting there at your desk going, time to think about the problem and sketch out the answer.
Yeah, I don't have a studio. Because most of the time, I mean, if I can, I'll be playing golf.
Are there some areas that you'd like to talk about? We have a sort of mixed audience between insiders and younger people who, because it's free, listen to podcasts.
Well, I was starting to talk about school and the idea of that art education. I think that we, at least from my experience anyway, they get a lot more out of just being around each other, right? I teach a course that I basically call How Not to Do Anything. And that comes back to like the last thing, right? So how not to do anything isn't not doing anything. It's just how you do things to maximize or to minimize. So not having a studio gives me a benefit of not having to always be in one place, for sure. And that already cuts out a big part of like an expense. And then on the other hand, it gives me room to think, room to be in places and have time with things. And then therefore, I could have that thought process that brings together hopefully something interesting as an exhibition.
That's a different situation if somebody's like, I'm a painter.
Yeah.
But then there's techniques they could learn and actual
No, for sure.
kinds of things that are important.
But techniques are like, on the one hand, they're techniques, and on the other hand, they're like untechnical, right?
Well, you have to learn something to not do it sometimes.
Right. But this is the thing at the moment, is that I would say people are like living a bit in amnesia in the sense that they know certain things, but they don't know a lot of things. And they don't know a lot of things about art, which is kind of, to me, problematic, As we discussed Paul Thek, nobody would even know who Paul Thek is to begin with, If you don't know the history of art, how do you make art today? If you don't know what's happened before
It's like the minimalists, they all learned how to go to a museum and sketch a portrait, and they could do it. So then when they didn't want to do it, they had some extra chops.
Yeah, which is part of like learning and unlearning. I mean, you're learning to think differently, or you're learning to look at different things. And then on top of all of that, I think it's also like, I don't understand how we expect a 25-year-old to like tell us about life. I never understood that.
Do you remember being 25 and thinking you knew?
No.
No.
I was sitting in a bar going, what the hell's going on?
What the hell's going on?
Yeah. Why the hell is that fucker getting a show? I mean, so no, I don't have that kind of pressure. I still don't have that pressure today. I think that we educate people as if they're going to, make their masterpiece at the thesis show.
I think once the schools became a place and the money became a place, that you could go to your parents and say, I want to be an artist. And they go, and you say, look at the CNBC talks about the art market, and I'm getting a degree from Yale or whatever. That sort of encouraged it, whereas I remember SVA 50 years ago had the best teachers, but it didn't give you a real degree. So it only attracted people who are like, I'm going to be an artist.
Right.
And now it's somewhat of a more bourgeois job.
Yes,
isn't it?
and I have to say, like a degree in the School of Art from Columbia is on top of the list of higher, for sure, if you applied in Texas, or for sure in Ohio,
or with a gallery in Chelsea.
Yeah, or no, more like Tribeca.
Okay, last question. Going to pull this all together. In golf, you are your score. It doesn't matter how you got there. It's how many shots in the hole. It's like they say the scorecard doesn't use any pictures. So a 4 is a 4, whether it hit off a tree and bounced through the sand trap and you hit the wrong shot, went in the hole, which is an appealing thing if you're saying that as an artist, there is no such thing as that number in that scorecard. Deep thinking, what do you think?
I enjoyed the process more than the scorecard. I enjoy realizing that I did a few good swings getting to some place.
So you enjoy your wins and you get through.
I don't even think about the wins.
We'll hear the F-bombs when it goes in the water. It's about managing your failures and your misses.
There you go.
Whereas art, I think, is about making great things. Golf is like, how many good shots can I put together in a row? Because you can't have great than bad. But art, I'd rather have bad, 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 great.
That's your philosophy. My philosophy is as long as I feel like I had a good swing, I'm very happy.
Okay, well, we're going to head out there. We'll see a little bit of what's going on. It's a $100,000 a hole.
That's why you're buying me all the stuff now.
That's why, because
you're going to make it all
I was
triple
going to make
back.
it back and all that. So, Baer Faxt audience, thank you for joining us. We're at Education City, one of the World Cup stadiums there. We're going to try to get educated on the golf course. Rirkrit, thanks again to joining us on the Baer Faxt Podcast. And if you listeners like these free podcasts, check out our new free newsletter, No Reserve, from the Baer Faxt.
Thanks for listening to the Baer Faxt Podcast. Our host is Josh Baer. Our audio editor is Christina Lee. Check back soon for future episodes as we unpack the inner workings of the global art industry through exclusive, candid interviews with key players in the business as they offer their perspectives on art and the market in the US, Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and beyond.